Okay, thank you, Brian. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you everyone for being with us this afternoon. Exciting Friday as we look to reopen the Florida Keys to our amazing visitors that we depend on so much for our livelihood. Hence this seminar, and your Marathon Chamber has been honored to work with our SBDC out of FIU, Small Business Development Center, of course, for a number of years through a number of disasters, but this even general day-to-day, because they provide so many great complimentary and free resources for you, our business members and our businesses here in the Florida Keys. So yet another webinar that we're putting on with the SBDC to help educate and empower you all and your staff as we move towards reopening during what we're calling the new normal, of course. So this seminar is going to focus on small business planning for your reopening and, of course, importantly, your future success. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Margie Smith, who's a business consultant here in the Florida Keys with the SBDC at FIU College of Business. And I've had the pleasure and privilege working with Margie for a number of years on a number of endeavors and initiatives. So we're well represented with the SBDC, and pleasure to partner with you, Margie, on this seminar. And I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Daniel. Again, thanks for the opportunity. So I'm actually going to be introducing our main speaker today, who is Brian Van Hook on the line here, who is our regional director of the SBDC at FIU. And again, that's the Small Business Development Center at FIU out of the College of Business. Brian's got quite a few years experience dealing with disasters, starting as early as Katrina, and he'll get into a little bit more of that. So with no more delay, I'd like to introduce Brian Van Hook, Regional Director of SBDC at FIU.
Thanks, Margie. I had to put my headset on because I always notice sometimes I get the little light that pops up that says your audio may not be working, so I'd rather just be safe than sorry. So just pardon my nice fancy headset. But I want to thank, again, Daniel and the Marathon Chamber. They've been a really great partner for us to work with. We love working them when it's kind of blue skies and there's no pandemics. And then obviously when you have those really good partnerships for good times, you obviously kind of redouble efforts when things are tough, like we're dealing with the pandemic. And I'll get into the presentation in 1 second, but I did want Brianna Williams, who's kind of our secret weapon on the event side, to kind of discuss any kind of logistics or anything you should be aware. I know she posted some stuff in the chat, but Brianna, you want to kind of give them any kind of tips on questions and things like that?
Yes, no problem. So thank you all for joining today. I just wanted to mention that I do have the chat function closed to kind of push everyone to put any questions that you have throughout the presentation in the Q&A box. We will be holding questions until the end of the presentation, so feel free to put them in the Q&A box throughout. Also, one of the things I'd like to mention is this webinar is being recorded, so it will be available to you afterwards on our YouTube page. And also through the chamber. I think they also send out the link as well. And then also with the presentation as well, we will be sending it out in our thank you email.
Okay, well, thank you, Brianna. And as I said, she's kind of our secret weapon. She's the one that emails you guys and follows up and things like that. So I always like to give Brianna a shout out for kind of organizing everything. So with that, let's get into it. And what I'm going to cover today for you is kind of like how phased reopenings work. Kind of briefly, kind of how it's structured federal, state, and then local at the county level, and then sometimes at the city level, and then get into some best practices for business reopening, importantly marketing strategies, business strategies, best practices, and then also some really good resources that you can take advantage of. And I want to save time at the end for questions and answers, but let's get right into it. So as Margie mentioned, I'm regional director of our center at FIU's College of Business. I'm originally from Louisiana. I have 15 years of disaster recovery and business continuity experience, working on such disasters as Hurricane Katrina, Midwest tornadoes, the BP oil spill, more recently Zika, and obviously hurricanes that we've had here locally. That's actually a picture from the BP oil spill where I was flying and working. In terms of SBDC, we have a team of 17 business specialists, such as Margie, that are focused on different areas of service, marketing, government contracting, international trade, business strategy. Margie is our local Keys consultant. We are actually seeking some additional funds from the CARES Act to try to add some additional help because we do have a lot more demand for business assistance. But we have a great team both in the Keys and in Miami that can help you. And obviously everybody's working remotely and virtually. As I mentioned, we cover Monroe County, the Keys, and also Miami-Dade County as well, if you're located in either one of those counties. And the best part is that's no cost assistance. It's paid for by your federal and state tax dollars. So let's get into COVID-19. Basically, I want to just do the basic kind of awareness. Obviously, the best way to protect yourself from COVID-19 is frequently washing your hands. If you don't have the ability to wash your hands, hand sanitizer is a good backup. Obviously, you want to cover your cough with the bend of an elbow or your tissue, and then maintain that 6 or 8 feet from people who are coughing and sneezing, kind of social distancing. Also, don't get lulled into a false sense of safety if you have gloves on, because a lot of times people are wearing gloves now, especially that they're going back to business, and they touch their face. It kind of defeats the purpose of you wearing gloves if you basically wear gloves and then touch your face or your mouth or anything like that. So be careful in that, and just be careful. And the CDC has some really good fact sheets and guidance that's up there as well. And we'll be sending you the PDF so you can have the links. Also, in terms of your business, the CDC is not recommending you go out and buy any really corrosive, super crazy cleaning. They say basically use the regular cleaning agents that you usually use for your business, follow the instructions, and basically focus on high traffic areas, things that are frequently used. Also provide disposable wipes so that your team can wipe down doorknobs, keyboards, remote controls, desks after they're using it. Particularly if you're in restaurants or retail, you obviously want to wipe down counters after use. You want to wipe down point of sale systems, conveyor belts, things like that. Anything that has a lot of interactions with customers and employees, you want to wipe those down frequently. Don't just do it once a day or at night. Also check your maintenance contracts and any of your supplies to make sure, because you're going to have increased demand and usage. And I would really strongly recommend you check out the CDC's website. They have really good guidance for businesses, and the link is available there. And they actually do get into more industry-specific information. So it's actually a good resource for businesses. Let's get into how phased reopening works, just so you understand it. I really want to point out the occupational risk pyramid. This is through OSHA. This is something that really shows, kind of like based on the industries and based on the workers, kind of who's at high risk and who's at lower risk. And this shows you how they factor in a lot of who's deemed essential, kind of who has more restrictions when they reopen, things like that. So obviously healthcare workers, morgue workers are at the top, then anything that's focused on more bigger crowds like movie theaters, sports centers, and then you get down to medium exposure is those that are basically stores, restaurants, retail, and then lower exposure obviously is anything that you can work remotely. But you want to factor that in based on your industry. For a phased reopening, obviously the White House and the federal government has outlined, what their kind of guidelines are. Then each state implements it a little bit differently. And then basically the counties kind of do it on their end, and then you might have some cities come as well. So I don't want to dwell too much on the federal and the White House, other than you guys know it's basically seeing a decline in cases for 14 days, seeing basically symptoms that might be undiagnosed COVID-19 decreasing, and then hospital capacity to keep up in case cases increase. And then they did structure it in terms of 3 phases. I don't really want to get into their phases because it is a little bit different when you get into the states and localities. They did kind of move some industries around. But I did include the link up there for the White House's reopening plan and kind of their phased reopening guidelines if you wanted to take a look. In terms of Florida, on April 29th, Governor DeSantis did announce his plan. Basically, he did begin it on May 4th. Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach were initially excluded because we had high cases of COVID-19. But the Keys was allowed to reopen, and they did have local reopenings. Obviously, everybody knows by now, June 1st, it's going to be opening for visitors. In the state's plan, they did have 25% capacity indoors, 25% for retail, and then they had some other things in there as well. Bars and movie theaters and gyms were still recommended to close. You can view the full executive order there. It's Executive Order 2112. And a lot of the different counties and cities have kind of gone by that guidance, as well as what CDC and OSHA put out. So now I got through federal, I got through state. Let's get into the Keys in Monroe County. As I mentioned, Monroe County was allowed to reopen some businesses as part of phase 1. And then everybody knows by now, they're going to be reopening to visitors on June 1st. I know everybody's super excited about that and kind of getting some of that additional business down there. They announced that from the county level that Florida Keys lodging businesses, so motel, vacation, RV parks, timeshares, they can begin accepting reservations, contingent that reservations are going to be honored starting June 1st. They also did note that retail businesses can operate at 50% capacity, but you have to follow proper social distancing and safety procedures. They also did do restaurants can operate at 50% capacity indoors. Very important, that does exclude employees. And they didn't have a limit on outdoor seating, provided that tables are 6 feet apart and that it's parties of 10 or less. So that was some good news for businesses, because I know some other areas it's been 25% capacity and things like that. So the 50% was welcome news. Bars and bar seating in restaurants will still remain closed. And bars are basically any business that derive more than 50% of revenue from alcohol sales. I know that some bars were able to kind of get around that particular guidance because they did have food service available. So if you had a food service license and you served food prior to COVID-19, then you were able to reopen for food service. But for Monroe County, they did basically define a bar as anybody that has 50% or more in revenue from alcohol sales. Also, they did specify that hair and nail salons, barbershops, massage therapists, they can open, but the capacity was limited to 25%. They did also note, as a lot of the professional services folks have been asked to do, to have by appointment only 15 minutes in between appointments and use that time for cleaning and sanitizing. No group appointments, and then masks need to be worn by all employees and customers, as is practicable. Sometimes it's not, but you need to do your best. I would definitely encourage you to visit the Monroe County website. They have really good instructions for businesses to kind of help you get your head around kind of the different orders and the different industries and the different guidelines and things like that. And I would encourage you to do it. And they're also updating it when additional information comes out. I was going to note that if you're located in Key West, they did have some additional business reopening guidance for businesses there. One of the key kind of additional things that they require is temperature checking. So they're basically temperature checking customers when they come in, and also related to employees. They did have a couple of other guidances specifically for restaurants. A lot of the businesses that we've talked to in Key West, particularly restaurants, they've already been aware of it and they're kind of gearing up for opening next week. But that's the link to that website that has the more specific guidance from City of Key West. So if you're there, you're going to want to pay attention to that in addition to what the guidance from the county. Just overview in terms of additional protocols. Overall for the Keys, employees and patrons must wear masks at all times. You have to have intense sanitizing of common areas, frequent touch points, as I mentioned, point of sale, like host stations, things like that. You need to enable that single point of entrance, so you don't have multiple entrances where people are coming in and out. You have to have one place to come in. Also create one-way circulation within the stores, and then space out customer queues like you've seen at the grocery store, like 6 feet apart. Additional protocols for restaurants is parties of 10 or fewer for outdoor seating, basically 6 feet in between the parties. Use disposable menus when you can, basically where it's practicable, or disinfect the menus after use. And then, as I reiterated, bar counter seating is closed. Also buffets, I know everybody's a big fan of buffets, but no buffets, no salad bars, also no samples, different things like that, because those are definitely a liability with COVID-19. But I would encourage you to check the county's website because they have really good guidance for businesses in terms of getting your head around it. So let me give you some additional considerations to factor in addition to the local guidance. We're stressing the most important thing you have to focus on reopening is how to best protect yourselves, your employees, and your customers. The steps that you take beforehand are key, and you shouldn't be back reopen until you're confident with the plan that you have and that you're following kind of the local guidance. Obviously, your preparations and your operations, they're going to differ depending on your industry, your product or service, your location, the type of customers that you service. I would encourage you to check the CDC's website again. The link that's provided up there, it's like a larger document that kind of outlines CDC activities, but starting on page 42, they do have a lot of those interim guidances for specific industries that really gives you kind of like a step-by-step process on reopening. And a lot of the cities and counties have been using that guidance to establish their stuff. But I would say this one is a little more detailed if you want to kind of think about operations and different protocols you should implement. And it starts on page 42 of the document. I did want to know kind of a real world example. This is actually a restaurant from Guangzhou, China. This was in January of this year. And actually the person that's highlighted as A1, that person was a COVID-19 positive, but they were asymptomatic. And they actually went to the restaurant with their family who's all seated at the A table. Because of airflow, because of the air conditioning, basically 9 people overall were infected. And you can see basically because of the airflow, because of that one customer, 3 people at the B table, basically 4 people at the A table, and then 1 person at the C table. And actually it's 2, you can't see because the arrow covers it up. But that basically was about 9 people infected from 1 person that had it. And I'm not really putting that out there to scare you guys. I'm just trying to show you guys how contagious this is. And if you just have 1 customer, there could be 9 cases, not including employees and things like that. So you really want to pay attention to the steps and things that you're doing. A lot of businesses, we're also recommending that you do come up with guidance and signage that you can put outdoor on your door, also indoors. Specifically, we've been recommending that you use the language county officials require employees and customers wear a face mask or face covering upon entering and exiting this establishment. That's kind of like no shoes, no shirt, no service. But it basically kind of like lets people know coming in, we expect you to wear a face mask. Obviously, you should place it prominently outside, and you should basically kind of use your host station or the front of house to basically kind of catch people that might be coming in that aren't wearing a mask. You can go an extra step because some businesses have been putting up a sign that basically says if you're COVID-19 positive or demonstrating symptoms, we would ask that you not enter the business. Just to kind of give you a little additional flexibility. Most of the customers have been very understanding, and everybody's been kind of really focused on public health and kind of protecting their neighbors and folks in the community. But you do want to have some safeguards just in case, and also kind of talk through from your business, how would you handle if somebody came in and was not willing to wear a face mask, because that could be a big deal. And you obviously want to focus on de-escalating a situation, make sure where you're talking to them, you're not interrupting the normal business operations. So those are some things to think about. But it would be a very good step to put a sign outdoors just requiring people to wear masks. In terms of employee safe best practices, you obviously, as I mentioned, want to routinely clean those point of sale equipment, any shared objects between use, encourage non-cash payments. I think everybody's been okay with that. You want to encourage contactless checkout via mobile card readers and basically have the customers insert the card themselves. Leave receipts on the counter. Don't hand it to them, because then that's a way for you to get exposed. And then for restaurants, I've been happy to see they've been discouraging the buzzers that people have, because those things, think about how many people touch those little buzzers between when people give it back and the wait staff and everybody else. So a lot of the guidance has been discouraging those buzzers, at least for the time being. I did want to mention, since we're in Florida, Disneyland did outline some new protocols when it reopened Shanghai Disneyland. Some of the protocols were virtual queuing to manage crowds at the entrance, in the rides, and in restaurants. They also did introduce measures with requiring face masks, contact tracing, and temperature checks. So those are the big guys. You always look to kind of big guys and little guys in terms of best practices. But Disney is actually kind of opening up in China, and they're implementing some of those different best practices to kind of stay ahead of things. If you want some additional best practices, there is good guidance and FAQs, again, on the CDC's website. So I'd really encourage you to go check it out. And at the end of the presentation, I also do have some links for more industry-specific stuff from the National Restaurant Association, the Hospitality and Lodging. And then I was going to mention that the U.S. Chamber does have a good summary of some of the OSHA guidance for businesses. And that particular presentation is called OSHA's Response to Workplace Safety and Coronavirus Exposure. I did include the link in there, although there's a lot of numbers and random letters. So we'll provide you with the PDF so you can use the link, but you can also just Google that particular name and then it'll come up pretty easily. And it's a really good walkthrough for the OSHA guidance. So now that I've given you kind of your vegetables and talked about kind of safety and kind of protocols and things like that, let's get back into some back to business strategies and marketing so that you can get your revenue and get the customers back. The thing I have to stress again is when you're getting back to business, you're going to come up with a really great marketing strategy. You're going to have really great operations. Your team is going to be very motivated, but you really do need to factor in that back to business strategy on safety and kind of protecting your employees, because you have to consider the Roach Report effect. You know, no business, whether it's restaurants or retail or anything else, they don't want to be on the Roach and Rat Report. So you want to take your proper steps to protect your customers' employees because that could really negate any really great marketing steps that you take. And that impacts you whether you're manufacturing, construction, retail, professional services. You know, if you get those negative customer reactions or any local press, you know, you're going to have some trouble with your business and reopening. So you definitely want to factor that in. A really great marketing strategy and kind of a playbook is Google's COVID-19 marketing playbook. It's based on Google's observations on how businesses are dealing with the pandemic. The handbook kind of everything for like phased reopenings and everything's in threes. So they phase the recovery in 3 phases, basically respond, rebuild, and then recover and reframe. Also, the marketing strategy is set up in 3 phases as well, where you're basically using customer insights to drive your approach, assessing the impact on your business, and then also taking action. So I did include the link up there so you can see the full playbook. But if you just Google, or you can use Yahoo or anything else, or you know, any other search engines, but search for Google's COVID-19 marketing playbook, it'll come up. It's been pretty popular and a lot of people have posted it. In terms of additional marketing strategies, many businesses, especially professional services, they've been contacting customers with reminders about annual check-ins or servicing as a way to kind of get the brand awareness out there and reminders about people. And a lot of people have been neglecting different services, you know, deferring, things like that. So it is a good time to check in for you to get back on their radar and actually get a couple customers in the door, or kind of ordering online, or kind of however you're set up. And also just don't discount snail mail as part of your marketing right now, because I know a lot of businesses are like social media, you know, email marketing, things like that. But given the large number of employees that are still working remotely, you can't discount, at least for the time being, the success of that traditional snail mail. And, you know, a lot of times the postman come into the door and dropping off a package or dropping off mail and things like that. Obviously people are cleaning them off, but that's really gets a lot of attention. So basically sending something, even if it's just a quick letter about, you know, this is a reminder about your annual service, or, you know, thank you for being a valued customer. Those kind of things actually could have some success right now. Obviously, you want to consider social media campaigns, any type of short-term, like video tutorials you can do, or any kind of special promotions that you can raise your brand awareness among those clients or folks that are familiar with you. In terms of kind of your communications with customers, you want to monitor your state and local guidance, as I mentioned, to any changes to occupancy rates or any hours of operations or any additional protocols. You know, they keep talking about like the second wave. So you want to kind of prepare your business in terms of, in case there are some restrictions or snapbacks and things like that. You know, hopefully everything's going to be okay, but you do have to be prepared. You also want to update your website to let any customers know if any of your ordering, shipping, or inventory is impacted, what's your operation status, when you expect to reopen. A lot of folks just reopen and they forget about doing that basic step. You also want to review any of your partner or competitor websites to learn about their status, or pick up any best practices. And then obviously I just mentioned, but you want to basically plan special promotions to raise awareness. After hurricanes and things like that, you always thank first responders, you thank police, you thank, those folks. Obviously right now, healthcare workers are kind of the front lines. So anything you can do to thank healthcare workers, any kind of county officials, anything you can do to raise awareness and entice customers back is always a good step. And then we've really been encouraging businesses to not discount gift cards as a strategy, because a lot of businesses did not have these programs in place ahead of time, and they kind of scrambled afterwards to get it in place. But basically, gift cards are a good way to get immediate cash in your business, because you can use it online, you can use it in person later, you can give it as a gift. And so it's a win-win situation. And it's a great way to emphasize buying local, shopping small, and help supporting local businesses that are impacted by the pandemic. Now I want to get into takeout orders and delivery services. A lot of restaurants and grocery stores have been shifting heavily to the delivery services to compensate for that loss of in-store traffic. Some businesses haven't even reopened yet because they're still relying on delivery and takeout. When you're revising your marketing in response to COVID-19, you obviously can consider offering some discounts for takeout orders, or for first-time users on some of those delivery apps. And depending on your location, you can make it easier for takeout orders by offering curbside pickup or contactless delivery, things like that. But you definitely need to market what services you're on or that you're doing takeout or delivery, because it's nothing if you're offering that service if you're not marketing it properly. So you want to update your website, even little things like updating signs on your business if you're not open. Those kind of things is ways that people can know, because a lot of people are very receptive to supporting local businesses. Like I know when a lot of folks get on DoorDash and some of the other apps, they look for local businesses right close to them or the ones that they like. And if you're on multiple platforms, you want to market that. So here's a quick rundown all the way from DoorDash, Postmates, Uber Eats, Instacart. A lot of folks are familiar with that. But it's very important that you do your research on how the deliveries work, how much in fees they charge, the speed that the deliveries are made, and then how and when you're going to receive your payments. You want to do your homework beforehand. You also want to set up your process and procedures on how you're going to handle those third-party delivery orders. There are some guidance in terms of especially Key West, kind of like how you're setting up the delivery, where the third-party delivery drivers are coming, how you're doing takeout. So you're going to want to factor that in. And just don't assume just because they're delivering the order, you don't have to really worry about it. You basically have to, because if there's any screw up with the order, if the soup is spilled all over the bag, if it's not hot, if it's missing something, they're not going to blame DoorDash. They're going to blame the restaurant that they ordered it from, because you guys organized it. So you need to set up a lot of those procedures on how you're going to make sure things are hot, how you're going to seal things, and also kind of cut down that time that the delivery driver is waiting at your restaurant, because the quicker somebody gets it, the more happy they're going to be. But I want to reiterate that third-party delivery apps can take up to a 30% commission on orders. So it's just like anything in business. You want to review the agreement, you want to review the contract, you want to make sure you're making the best decision based on your business. So, definitely can't discount that it's a good way to stay open. It's a way to keep your customers, to get new customers, and you can increase your range of service. But those fees are going to eat into your profits versus traditional operations. So you want to factor it into your business model and really take a deep dive into your financials. And for some businesses, it is cost prohibitive for them to do it. For some other businesses, maybe they look at it and they say, hey, maybe it actually might be a better idea for me to set up delivery to do it. So you just want to factor based on your type of business and your product and service and see what makes the best sense for you. And like I said, structure things the right way. And then, like it or not, pandemics are now going to be part of business continuity planning for businesses moving forward. In the past, we would always worry about a hurricane, road construction, internet, power outage, things like that. But now you have to factor in pandemics. And so for your business, you want to give strong consideration to strengthening your e-commerce and your website, and also direct-to-consumer sales. Because we saw, in real time, businesses that had really good sales channels for e-commerce and direct-to-consumer and the marketing to match, they saw their sales skyrocket, while the other folks that were just traditional bricks and mortar, they were shelter in place, they were closed up, and they really weren't able to kind of keep up. So you want to factor that into your business and actually think about it from a marketing and business perspective, but also think about it from a business continuity perspective, that it's going to make your business more resilient. You also want to consider that you don't have a one-size-fits-all marketing strategy, because it doesn't always work when each locality, as we saw, which you operate in, has different restrictions and different cases. You've seen a lot of the marketing and the messaging has been more kind of empathetic, more about brand awareness, more about thanking, employees, thanking customers, thanking the community, thanking healthcare workers. So it's been a little more empathetic, less like sales and in your face. And so you want to ensure that those marketing strategies you have, that they're agile, that you can change the message depending on, the situation and the circumstances, because that could cost you money and that could delay your marketing getting out. In terms of some common questions that we see, one of the questions we get a lot is basically, how should you handle it if a customer resists wearing a mask in the business? And as we noted, you should basically post signage clearly at your entrances and inside the business stating local requirements on wearing face masks. You also do want to develop a policy on how to handle a customer in this situation, with a priority on screening as they enter to minimize those disruptions. You don't want to let them get too far in the business. It's also a safety issue, because you don't want somebody walking all around your place if they're not wearing a mask. Secondly, a lot of businesses have asked, should I require all my employees be tested before I reopen? The general guidance has been no, that testing is limited to people who are exhibiting symptoms or who have been exposed to COVID-19. Instead, you should conduct health and temperature screenings when employees are checking in. Obviously, some areas have a little more requirements than others, but as a general business practice, a lot of businesses are doing kind of like a check-in. And it can be really non-invasive too. You can even just have the employees check their temperature at home and kind of like report it to you. And if they're above, the certain threshold, then they should basically stay home. And you don't have to report that individual number. You can just do it as a pass or fail and keep a log. Because a lot of times if you're keeping a log of that kind of stuff, it is helpful later on if there is an issue or something like that. But at least checking with employees when they check in and kind of doing it outside of the restaurant or the retail space or kind of your office, it is a way for you to monitor it and make sure that the employees are not coming in infected or asymptomatic and things like that. So that's at least a way for you to monitor it. In terms of some additional links, I've really promoted the CDC websites a lot. So I did include some information on their website as well as their FAQs. The Florida Department of Health has a really good website for businesses, and they also do have a resource toolkit that's available as well. The World Health Organization has a FAQ document as well for businesses and for the community. The U.S. Chamber has had a lot of good information, in addition to some of the industry specific. National Grocers Association, Food Industry Association, National Restaurant Association has a really, really good reopening guide. So I definitely would recommend, if you're a restaurant, check it out. National Retail Federation has one. And then I know in the Keys, we've been really looking at the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association guidance for a lot of the businesses in those particular industries. So with that, I'm going to kind of open it up for questions. And just wanted to stress, guys, I think we should definitely be really excited for June 1st that visitors going to be coming down. I can tell you we work with businesses both in Miami-Dade and Monroe. A lot of Miami-Dade folks are excited about the Keys reopening and kind of ready to go and visit and spend some money. But definitely you need to make the proper steps now to protect your business, and also make some of those steps, whether it's from your operational side, from your marketing side, so that you can take full advantage. And then obviously kind of navigating a lot of the different loan programs, because there still are some of them available to get some capital to support kind of operational expenses and kind of as you're getting back up and running. And if we can help you from SBDC's end, please count on us. So here's our contact information. Obviously you can visit our website or give us a call. You can email us, and then we are on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. We actually post a lot of these different webinars and resources and kind of latest information as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to questions. I just want to thank Daniel and the Chamber. Also want to thank Margie for kind of her everything she's doing to help businesses and just kind of open it up to any questions. So,
Okay.
Brianna.
So our first question we had was, are there any industry-specific guidelines for museums?
I noticed that they did have some guidance in different counties regarding museums. I would encourage you to check the Monroe County website for local guidance specific to that. And then also for museums, there is a lot of kind of national guidance from different associations and things like that. So I would encourage you to check out both of those websites because they do have some guidance. Some counties and cities have been a little more specific on arts and culture. So I would encourage you to check the Monroe County website, but then also check out your industry association because I do know that they do have a lot of information on guidelines for museums.
Okay, and then our next question we had was, do we know when bars will be allowed to open?
I would say at this time, no, because that is under one of the different tiers that is a little more high risk, just because people are sitting a lot closer together. I know that there are some bar setups that are open because they're in a hotel or they're in a restaurant and things like that. But bars specifically, I think that has been identified at the federal, state, and local level as a little more high risk. So I think it's still going to be dependent on the number of cases and seeing cases decreasing. But as I mentioned, for some of the bars and breweries, I know that they have set up operations where they were able to do kind of like, takeout or pickup, or in some cases, a bar had food service. So they were able to open the kitchen for food service and provide around that. So I would encourage you, depending on the setup of your particular business, to explore some of those business strategies, because that is a way for you to stay open at like a reduced capacity, but to be able to get some revenue and some sales in. In terms of phase 2, Florida did not set up, I see that the question was, what are the parameters under which Florida moves to phase 2? I think that they're monitoring reduction in cases. They're obviously following the federal guidance as well, related to the symptoms and kind of potential cases related to symptoms that are not diagnosed as COVID-19, and then also the hospital capacity. I think I've seen in different counties, the hospital capacity has tended to be consistent, that we've kind of been at that area where we've been able to handle it. But I think still we're seeing cases and they're not declining. I think that you're still seeing cases pop up. So the hope would probably be later in the summer or by the fall, we're able to move to phase 2. But I think it really is dependent on how phase 1 goes and that everybody still practices proper public health protocols in terms of wearing masks, wearing gloves, social distancing, not getting crazy like we saw a lot of those folks out in, I think it was Missouri, kind of going to big gatherings and things like that. Because I think what we do now as we reopen is going to dictate in the next 2 weeks how many cases we have. And then in the next 2 weeks, how many cases are after that. So I think if everybody follows proper protocols and kind of just takes the proper safety steps, I think we can be trending towards phase 2, maybe by the end of the summer and the fall. But we're definitely not out of the woods yet. And as I showed you guys during the presentation, how contagious this is. And actually one of my neighbors, it was a mother and a son, the son contracted COVID-19. Basically they have 3 brothers overall, and the whole household, the mom caught COVID-19 and then 2 of the brothers caught COVID-19 as well. So it is very contagious, especially in kind of small confined places. So I think that kind of what we do in the next 2 to 3 weeks is going to be dependent on kind of how things go. So with that, do we have any other questions from Margie or for Daniel or anything I didn't cover?
Actually, I'll go ahead and ask myself, where are we right now then on the number of cases in Miami-Dade and Broward? Those are not going down yet, right?
No, I think the latest I saw as of yesterday, there was like maybe 100 new cases in Miami. It's ranged anywhere from 50 to 75 to 100 cases per day. So we're still not where we're like at 10 cases, 15 cases. I think some of those have been related to assisted living facilities, because that's really where you do see a big spike between employees and residents. But I think consistently Miami-Dade and Broward, we're still seeing anywhere between 50 to 100 cases reported per day. And that's not necessarily that we weren't catching those cases before. It's just that now we're doing a lot more testing. So I think that's why testing is key for the reopening, because they can kind of identify where there's hotspots. And then we can also see where you're seeing a reduction in cases, where we can kind of, move to phase 2 for some of the business reopenings. So, but I would say at least for the foreseeable future, we will be stuck in phase 1 unless there's a considerable downturn in the cases.
Thank you.
And Margie, I would just ask you, from the businesses that you're working with, how are you seeing them faring with the reopening? Has the guidance been helpful for them, and kind of, they're kind of following all the guidelines?
Yes, I gotta say, a lot of my clients have focused on the HR ramifications of all of this. Things like if they got the PPP loan, what do they do if they have folks who went on unemployment and are not making themselves available to come back, for example. There's HR issues. There's a lot of more focus, at least with my clients right now, on making sure they get the loan forgiven for PPP and they get the disaster loans to begin with. Then they honestly that much focus on the reopening with the questions they're asking me right now.
Okay, cool. And then Daniel, any other thoughts on your end from the chamber side, or kind of what you're seeing?
No, I think you guys, I'm here, sorry guys, Brian, I think you guys covered it pretty well. Obviously surprised there's still PPP money left, but that's great. And we'll be posting your link for the great webinar you recently did on the forgiveness side of it, which is now going to be the focus of a lot of our businesses. But no, you guys pretty thorough on that. I appreciate it.
No, appreciate that. And then I would say for PPP, they did have a development yesterday. So I know this is going to be recorded and played later. It is May 29th when I'm recording this. Yesterday, the House of Representatives did pass a PPP loan forgiveness, a kind of like improvements bill, where in particular, they did increase the time for the period for the loan from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. And then they also did reduce the percentage. It was 25% for payroll and 25% for non-payroll. They did reduce that down to 60%. So I would say that's encouraging. I think the Senate does want to make some adjustments to that. They want to make some changes. I think that generally they agree with what it was. They just did say that there was some kind of like technical corrections they needed to make. So everybody's optimistic that maybe by the end of next week that bill would pass. I think that would help a lot of businesses, because we've heard from a lot of businesses that they're coming up on the end of the 8 weeks and they're concerned because they might have to lay people off again and put them back on unemployment. And obviously the focus for everybody, including the employers, is they want to keep people on payroll. Obviously, if we're reopening, and all that. So that was helpful. And I also would mention on PPP, the reason why we've been seeing more money going out the door for the second round and actually getting to small businesses is because community banks and CDFIs have been more prominent and have been more featured. And, a lot of the folks in the Keys have been going to a lot of the community banks that are down there, and they've been seeing a lot of success. I was going to note that yesterday, the Treasury and SBA did announce a set aside of $10 billion for CDFIs. And those CDFIs are going to have those loans, loan funding available to them. So I know that in the Keys, there are some CDFIs, but I know most of the ones that are down there, they're more statewide groups. But I would encourage you definitely, if you haven't got a PPP loan yet, to go to a community bank or a CDFI, because they do have funds available and they're still giving them out. So with that, I just want to thank you guys for being on the webinar. I want to thank Daniel for the Chamber for hosting it. I want to thank Margie for everything she's doing. And definitely, come up with some good strategies on business reopening and follow the local guidance from the county, and also depending where you're located, your city. Because I think having a good strategy on reopening is going to set you up for future success, but definitely focus on things that you can also make your business more resilient. Like we talked about, kind of your sales channels, your marketing, offering different services and things like that. A lot of restaurants too, they've been talking about how they're changing their menu to be more geared towards takeout and delivery, because maybe something that you serve in-house wasn't necessarily conducive to folks taking it for takeout or delivery. So those are some things you could do where you could have kind of one menu for takeout and delivery, and then one for for in restaurant dining. That's one way you could be a little more flexible and a little more resilient. So, and I was just going to say to Brianna, thanks for everything she did. And if we didn't answer your question or if something comes up afterwards, feel free to email Brianna, and we will be providing you with the recording. We'll be posting it to our YouTube page, and then Daniel will also get it. And then we will send you a copy of the presentation in PDF format so that you can have the slides and as well as the links. So just thanks again.
Note I'd like to add real quick, that CDFI he mentioned, that's a community development finance institution. So that's a nonprofit entity that is an alternative lender. Even though we don't have any based in the Keys, we absolutely do have some that serve the Keys. And one example nearby is Accion in Miami, for example. They do this alternative lending. And that's the kind of facility that, again, we don't have it in the Keys, but we do have it that covers the Keys.
Thanks, Margie. So just thanks to you guys for watching today. We know that you have a lot of stuff that you're working on, and then just count on us and count on the chamber if we can be a resource for you.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian, and Brianna, Margie, of course, and everyone on the call. Appreciate your time, and your Marathon Chamber of Commerce and, of course, our SBDC are all here to serve you and support you and advocate for you and help you out any way we can, and this is just one of the many ways. So please contact me anytime, CEO@FloridaKeysMarathon.com is the best way, or call us up at 305-743-5417 if we can help you out. And thank you, everyone. Have a great Friday, a nice weekend, and June 1, let's go.
Yeah, let's get going. So thanks, guys. Have a great weekend, and good luck next week.